The morning fog hung thick over Arlington National Cemetery as Sergeant Michael Rodriguez adjusted his pristine uniform one final time. The crisp October air carried the weight of history through the rows of white headstones, each marking a life given in service to the nation. Rodriguez had been a tomb guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier for 3 years, and today marked something special: his younger brother's wedding in Philadelphia, a 4-hour drive from Arlington. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood majestically before him, its white marble gleaming even in the dim morning light. Rodriguez felt the familiar surge of pride and responsibility that came with being one of the elite soldiers chosen to guard this sacred site. The tomb honored unidentified American service members who died in combat, and Rodriguez knew that every step he took, every movement he made, represented something far greater than himself. His relief guard, Corporal James Mitchell, approached with the same measured precision that defined every action at the tomb. "Ready for the ceremony, Rodriguez?" Mitchell asked, his voice carrying the respect that permeated every interaction between the guards. "Always ready," Rodriguez replied, straightening his shoulders. The changing of the guard ceremony was performed every hour during the day, a ritual that had continued uninterrupted since 1937. Through world wars, natural disasters, and national emergencies, today would be no different despite Rodriguez's personal plans. The ceremony proceeded with its usual flawless precision. 21 steps south, turn and face east for 21 seconds, 21 steps north, turn and face east for 21 seconds. Each number represented the highest military honor, a 21-gun salute. Rodriguez executed each movement with the mechanical perfection that had been drilled into him through months of training. Tourists gathered behind the barriers, cameras clicking softly as they witnessed this solemn display of honor. Children whispered questions to their parents about the soldier who walked so perfectly, so deliberately. Rodriguez could feel their eyes on him, but his focus remained absolute. This wasn't a performance, it was a sacred duty. After the ceremony concluded and Mitchell took his position, Rodriguez made his way to the quarters where he would change from his ceremonial uniform into his dress blues for the journey to Philadelphia. His brother David's wedding was scheduled for 6 in the evening, and Rodriguez had calculated every minute of the drive to ensure he would arrive with time to spare. As Rodriguez changed clothes, he reflected on how different his world was from his brother's. David worked in finance, lived in a comfortable suburban home, and worried about things like mortgage rates and school districts. Rodriguez's world revolved around precision, honor, and the weight of representing every fallen soldier who would never return home to their families. The drive from Arlington to Philadelphia typically took 4 hours, but Rodriguez had built in extra time for potential traffic delays. His dress blue uniform hung carefully in the back of his car, protected by a garment bag. Every ribbon, every insignia was positioned exactly where it should be. Even attending a family celebration, Rodriguez maintained the standards that had been ingrained in him since basic training. The wedding meant everything to his family. David and his fiancée Sarah had been together for 6 years, and their relationship had been one of the stable constants in the Rodriguez family's life. Rodriguez's parents had divorced when he was 16, and the military had become his anchor, his source of structure and purpose. David had chosen a different path, but the brothers remained close despite their different worlds. As Rodriguez pulled out of the cemetery gates, he noticed a black sedan following at a respectful distance. This wasn't unusual. Security around Arlington was always tight, and various government vehicles routinely patrolled the area. Rodriguez thought nothing of it as he merged onto the highway heading north toward Philadelphia. The first hour of the drive passed uneventfully. Rodriguez listened to classical music, the same type of music that often played during ceremonies at the tomb. The familiarity was comforting, helping him transition from his role as a tomb guard to his role as a brother and son celebrating a family milestone. Near Baltimore, Rodriguez noticed the same black sedan still behind him. It had maintained a consistent distance for over an hour, never attempting to pass despite opportunities to do so. A slight unease crept into Rodriguez's mind, but he dismissed it as coincidence. Plenty of people traveled the I-95 corridor between Washington and Philadelphia. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. David's name appeared on the display. "Hey, Mike, where are you?" David's voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervousness that Rodriguez recognized from their childhood. About an hour outside Baltimore. I'll be there with plenty of time to spare, Rodriguez assured his brother. I can't believe this is actually happening, David said. Sarah's family is already at the venue. Mom's crying happy tears, and Dad's pretending he's not emotional about giving his blessing. Rodriguez smiled, remembering how their father had initially been skeptical of David's relationship with Sarah. Time had proven David's choice to be wise, and their father had grown genuinely fond of his future daughter-in-law. Everything's going to be perfect, Rodriguez told his brother. Sarah's lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have her. After ending the call, Rodriguez glanced in his rearview mirror again. The black sedan was still there, maintaining the same distance it had kept for nearly 2 hours. This was no coincidence. Rodriguez's military training kicked in, and he began to consider possibilities. Was this some kind of security protocol he wasn't aware of? Had something happened at Arlington that required additional surveillance of the guards? Rodriguez decided to test his suspicions. He signaled and moved to the right lane, reducing his speed slightly. The black sedan matched his movements, confirming that he was indeed being followed. The question was why and by whom. As he approached the outskirts of Philadelphia, Rodriguez faced a dilemma. Should he continue to the wedding venue and potentially bring unwanted attention to his family's celebration? Should he pull over and confront whoever was following him? Or should he trust that this was some kind of legitimate security measure he simply wasn't informed about? The exit for the wedding venue appeared ahead. Rodriguez had to make a decision that would affect not only his own safety, but potentially the safety of everyone he cared about most in the world. Rodriguez made a split-second decision that would change everything. Instead of taking the exit to the wedding venue, he continued straight on I-95, watching as the black sedan stayed with him. His heart rate increased, but his training kept him calm and focused. If someone was following him, he needed to understand who and why before putting his family at risk. 3 miles past the wedding venue exit, Rodriguez spotted a rest area ahead. He signaled and pulled in, parking near the main building where there would be witnesses and security cameras. The black sedan followed him into the rest area, but parked at the far end of the lot, maintaining distance while keeping Rodriguez in sight. Rodriguez sat in his car for several minutes, observing the sedan through his mirrors. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, and the license plate appeared to be government-issued. His phone buzzed with a text from David asking about his arrival time. Rodriguez typed back that he was running slightly behind due to traffic, but would be there soon. As Rodriguez debated his next move, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize with a Washington, D.C. area code. Sergeant Rodriguez, he answered, using his military bearing even in this uncertain situation. Sergeant, this is Agent Patricia Chen with the FBI. Please remain in your vehicle. We have agents approaching your location for your protection. Rodriguez felt his world shift. The FBI protection? Agent Chen, I need to understand what's happening. I'm supposed to be at my brother's wedding in an hour. Sergeant, we received credible intelligence this morning about a potential threat against tomb guards. We've been providing discreet security for you and the other guards as a precautionary measure. However, the situation has escalated, and we need to speak with you immediately. Before Rodriguez could respond, he saw 2 people in business attire approaching his car from different directions. The woman was Asian American, probably in her 40s, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. The man was tall, African American, and moved with the awareness of someone trained in tactical situations. Agent Chen identified herself through the passenger window, showing her credentials. Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm Agent Chen. This is Agent Marcus Thompson. We need to talk, but first, is there somewhere safe we can move this conversation? Somewhere away from public view? Rodriguez's mind raced through the implications. A threat against tomb guards meant this was serious, potentially involving national security. But his brother's wedding was starting in less than an hour, and his entire family would be wondering where he was. There's a police station about 5 minutes from here, Rodriguez said. But Agent Chen, I need to understand how serious this threat is. My family is expecting me, and I can't just disappear without explanation. Agent Thompson leaned down to the driver's window. Sergeant, the threat is serious enough that we've suspended all public access to the tomb of the unknown soldier as of 30 minutes ago. We're taking every precaution to ensure the safety of all tomb guards. The weight of this information hit Rodriguez immediately. The tomb was never closed to the public except in the most extreme circumstances. The last time access had been suspended was during the immediate aftermath of 9/11. Whatever was happening was significant enough to break a tradition that had lasted decades. Follow us to the police station, Agent Chen instructed. We'll have officers escort your family to a secure location if necessary, but first we need information that only you can provide. The drive to the police station took 7 minutes through Philadelphia traffic. Rodriguez called David during the drive, his hands shaking slightly as he held the phone. David, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to be delayed, but I can't explain everything right now. Tell Mom and Dad that I'm safe, but there's been a security situation related to my duties. Don't let anyone leave the wedding venue until you hear from me again. Mike, you're scaring me. What kind of security situation? David's voice carried the weight of someone who had grown up during the post-9/11 era and understood that security situations could have serious implications. I can't say more right now, but please trust me. Keep everyone together, don't let anyone wander off alone, and if anyone asks about me, just say I'm delayed due to military obligations. I'll call you as soon as I can. At the police station, Rodriguez was escorted to a conference room where Agent Chen laid out a situation that seemed like something from a thriller movie. A domestic terrorist cell had been intercepted planning an attack on Arlington National Cemetery, specifically targeting the tomb guards as symbols of American military honor. The intelligence indicates they planned to kidnap a tomb guard as part of a larger plot to desecrate the tomb of the unknown soldier. Agent Chen explained, spreading photographs across the table. We believe they've been conducting surveillance on the guards for several weeks, learning schedules and routines. Rodriguez studied the photographs. They showed the cemetery from various angles, including close-ups of the guards during ceremonies. One photo made his blood run cold. It was clearly taken during his guard duty 3 days earlier, showing him in perfect detail as he performed the changing of the guard ceremony. Agent Thompson continued the briefing. We intercepted communications suggesting they planned to grab a guard away from the cemetery, believing that would be easier than attempting something on the grounds themselves. Your trip to Philadelphia today matched perfectly with their operational window. The realization hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. His family celebration had inadvertently put him in danger, and potentially put his family at risk as well. Are they targeting the wedding venue? Is my family safe? We have no indication they know about the wedding specifically, Agent Chen assured him. But we believe they were planning to intercept you during your travel today. The fact that you deviated from expected routes and came to a public location with witnesses likely prevented their attempt. Rodriguez looked at his watch. The wedding ceremony had started 15 minutes ago. His brother was getting married, his parents were celebrating, and he was sitting in a police station conference room learning about a terrorist plot that had targeted him personally. What happens now? Rodriguez asked. How long until this threat is neutralized? Agent Thompson's expression was grim. We have teams moving on suspected locations right now, but until we have confirmation that all cell members are in custody, we can't guarantee your safety or the safety of your family. Rodriguez felt the weight of his dual responsibilities, his duty as a soldier and his obligation as a family member. The tomb guards were trained to put duty first, but this situation blurred the lines between duty and family in ways he had never anticipated. His phone buzzed with another text from David. Where are you? Sarah keeps asking if you're okay. The ceremony is starting. Rodriguez showed the message to the agents. Agent Chen considered for a moment before speaking. Sergeant, we can provide security for the wedding venue, but you need to understand that your presence there could potentially put others at risk if our ongoing operations don't neutralize the threat completely. The choice before Rodriguez was unlike any decision he had ever faced. Every instinct as a brother told him to go to the wedding immediately. Every instinct as a soldier told him to trust the professionals and follow their guidance. The weight of the tomb guard's responsibility seemed to extend far beyond the cemetery grounds, reaching into every aspect of his personal life. Rodriguez stared at his phone, reading David's increasingly worried messages. The wedding ceremony was proceeding, but his absence was creating a growing sense of unease among his family members. He could picture his mother's concerned face, his father's stern questions, and David's attempt to maintain composure while his world filled with anxiety about his missing brother. Agent Chen received a call that lasted several minutes. Rodriguez watched her facial expressions, trying to read the situation from her reactions. When she ended the call, her expression was a mixture of relief and continued concern. "We've made arrests at 2 locations," she announced. 3 individuals are in custody, but we're still searching for at least 2 more members of the cell. The immediate threat to you may be reduced, but we can't declare it eliminated until we have everyone. Rodriguez felt a surge of hope mixed with frustration. Progress was being made, but the situation remained unresolved. His watch showed that the wedding ceremony should be concluding soon, and the reception would begin within the hour. "Agent Chen, if you can provide security at the wedding venue, I need to be there. My family doesn't understand what's happening, and my absence is causing them distress. As a tomb guard, I've sworn to honor the fallen, but I also have obligations to the living people who matter most to me." Agent Thompson nodded slowly. "We understand the position you're in, Sergeant. We can establish a security perimeter around the venue, but you need to understand that some restrictions will apply. No one leaves the venue alone. We'll need a list of all attendees, and we'll have agents posing as wedding guests." The thought of FBI agents at his brother's wedding seemed surreal, but Rodriguez recognized it was the best compromise available. "How quickly can you make this happen?" "We already have people en route to the venue," Agent Chen replied. "We've been monitoring the location as a precaution since we learned about your travel plans. The venue management has been informed that there's a security situation, but they believe it's related to a general threat, not something specific to your family." Rodriguez called David immediately. "David, I'm okay and I'm coming to the reception. There's been a security situation related to my military service, and there will be some additional security at the venue tonight. Federal agents will be present, but they're there for protection, not because anyone did anything wrong." "Mike, what the hell is going on? Mom's been crying, Dad's been pacing, and Sarah's family thinks we're some kind of criminals or something." "It's related to my position as a tomb guard. There was a credible threat, but it's being handled. The agents are very professional and they'll be discreet. House people won't even notice them." Rodriguez could hear the relief in David's voice mixed with residual worry. "Just get here, man. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and I need my brother here." The drive to the wedding venue took place in a convoy that Rodriguez would never have imagined an hour earlier. His car was flanked by 2 unmarked FBI vehicles, and he knew that additional agents had already secured the venue perimeter. The normalcy of driving to his brother's wedding reception contrasted sharply with the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the journey. The venue was a historic mansion that had been converted into an event space, surrounded by manicured gardens and tall trees that provided natural screening from the street. As Rodriguez pulled into the parking area, he noticed several people who were clearly not wedding guests positioned strategically around the grounds. Agent Chen met him at his car. "Sergeant, we've briefed the venue staff and your immediate family about the basic situation. Your parents know you're safe and that this is related to your military service. Your brother's new wife and her family have been told there's a general security precaution. Nothing more specific." Rodriguez straightened his dress blue uniform and walked toward the mansion's main entrance. Through the windows he could see the reception in full swing. His family and friends were celebrating, dancing, and enjoying what should have been a perfect evening. The contrast between the joy inside and the security measures outside struck him powerfully. David met him at the door, pulling him into a fierce hug. "I was starting to think something terrible had happened to you." "I'm here now," Rodriguez said simply. "How's married life treating you so far?" David's smile was genuine but strained. "It would be better if I understood what's going on. Mom's been asking questions I can't answer, and Dad's been giving me that look he gets when he thinks someone's not telling him the truth." Rodriguez looked across the reception hall and saw his parents approaching. His mother's relief was visible from across the room, while his father's expression showed the mixture of concern and curiosity that Rodriguez had expected. "Miguel," his mother said, using his childhood name as she always did during emotional moments. "Thank God you're safe." "What happened?" Rodriguez had rehearsed this conversation during the drive. "There was a security threat related to my duties at Arlington. Federal agents were protecting all the tomb guards as a precaution. The situation is under control now." His father, a Vietnam veteran who understood the weight of military service, nodded slowly. "Son, is this something we need to worry about long term?" "No, Dad, it was a specific threat that's being resolved. The agents here tonight are just being extra careful. Sarah approached, radiant in her wedding dress but clearly concerned about the unusual circumstances surrounding her reception. Mike, I'm so glad you're here. David was trying to stay calm, but I could tell he was worried sick. I'm sorry I missed the ceremony, Sarah. This day should be perfect for you both. Sarah's smile was warm and understanding. You're here now, and that's what matters. David told me about your work at Arlington. We're proud of what you do. As Rodriguez moved through the reception, greeting relatives and friends, he remained acutely aware of the FBI agents positioned throughout the venue. They had indeed been discreet. Most guests would assume they were friends of the family or venue staff. However, Rodriguez could identify them by their positioning, their alertness, and the way they maintained sight lines throughout the room. The evening proceeded with remarkable normalcy, considering the circumstances. Rodriguez danced with his mother, gave an impromptu speech about his brother's happiness, and even managed to relax enough to enjoy the celebration. However, he never forgot that this joyous family gathering was taking place under federal protection due to a terrorist threat. During the father-daughter dance between Sarah and her father, Agent Chen approached Rodriguez discreetly. We've made 2 additional arrests. We believe we've neutralized the immediate threat, but we'll maintain protection through the night as a precaution. Rodriguez felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Does this mean my family is no longer in danger? The specific threat that brought us here today appears to be resolved, but Sergeant, your role as a tomb guard means you'll always carry certain risks. This incident has highlighted vulnerabilities we hadn't fully considered before. As the reception continued into the evening, Rodriguez found himself contemplating the intersection of his 2 worlds, the sacred duty of honoring fallen soldiers and the precious relationships with living family members. Tonight had shown him that these worlds were more connected than he had ever realized, and that protecting one sometimes required risking the other. The weight of being a tomb guard extended far beyond the cemetery grounds, reaching into every aspect of his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. As the reception wound down near midnight, Rodriguez felt exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. The emotional weight of the day, from the morning's routine ceremony at the tomb to the evening's extraordinary security situation, had taken its toll. He watched his brother and new sister-in-law saying goodbye to guests, their faces glowing with happiness despite the unusual circumstances that had marked their special day. Agent Chen approached Rodriguez one final time as the venue began to empty. Sergeant, we need to discuss your return trip to Arlington tomorrow and the security protocols that will be in place going forward. Rodriguez had been dreading this conversation. The reality of his situation was becoming clear. His life as a tomb guard would never be quite the same after today's events. What kind of protocols are we talking about? Enhanced background monitoring, modified duty schedules to reduce predictability, and mandatory security briefings for all tomb guards. The attack planning we uncovered was more sophisticated than we initially realized. These individuals had been studying the guards' routines for months. The implications settled over Rodriguez like a heavy blanket. The precision and predictability that defined the tomb guard traditions, the very elements that made the honor guard so meaningful, had been weaponized against them by people who sought to destroy what they represented. Rodriguez's parents approached, ready to say their goodbyes. His mother pulled him aside while his father talked with David and Sarah. Miguel, I need to know, is this going to happen again? Are you safe doing this job? Rodriguez had been asking himself the same question all evening. Mom, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that what we do at Arlington matters. Today proved that there are people who hate what we represent badly enough to plan violence against us. That doesn't make me want to quit. It makes me understand how important the work really is. His mother's eyes filled with tears. I'm proud of you, son, but I'm also terrified. When you chose to become a tomb guard, I thought the biggest risk was standing outside in bad weather. Rodriguez hugged his mother tightly. The men buried at that tomb faced much greater risks than I'll ever face. If honoring their sacrifice comes with some danger, then that's part of the price of the privilege. His father joined them, having heard the end of the conversation. Son, your mother's right to be concerned, but she's also right to be proud. What happened today shows that what you do matters enough for bad people to notice. That means it matters enough for good people to appreciate. The drive back to his hotel that night took place under continued FBI escort. Rodriguez had initially planned to drive back to Arlington early Sunday morning, but Agent Thompson had insisted on overnight protection until they could be certain all members of the terrorist cell had been apprehended. In his hotel room, Rodriguez finally had time to process the full scope of what had occurred. He opened his laptop and began writing in the journal he had kept since becoming a tomb guard. Tonight's entry would be unlike any other. October 15th. Today, I learned that serving as a tomb guard means more than I ever understood. The honor isn't just in the ceremony or the precision of the movements. It's in accepting that representing fallen heroes makes you a target for people who hate what America stands for. It's in understanding that your family shares that risk simply by loving you. As Rodriguez wrote, his phone buzzed with messages from other tomb guards who had been briefed on the situation. Corporal Mitchell had sent a simple message. "Glad you're safe, brother. See you Monday." Sergeant First Class Williams, the most senior guard, had written, "Rodriguez, what happened today reminds all of us why we do what we do. The tomb represents something worth protecting, and that means we're worth attacking. Stay strong." Sunday morning brought news that the final 2 members of the terrorist cell had been arrested during overnight raids in Virginia. Agent Chen called Rodriguez personally to inform him that the immediate threat had been eliminated, but that enhanced security measures would remain in place indefinitely. The drive back to Arlington felt different than any journey Rodriguez had made before. The familiar landmarks, the Pentagon, the Potomac River, the solemn entrance to Arlington National Cemetery, all carried new weight. He was returning not just to his duties, but to a role that he now understood carried implications far beyond the cemetery grounds. At the cemetery, Rodriguez found that news of the incident had already spread through the tight-knit community of guards and support staff. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer for the Tomb Guard unit, was waiting for him at the quarters. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm glad you're safe. I need to brief you on the changes that will be implemented starting tomorrow." The briefing revealed the extent to which the terrorist plot had been developed. The cell had obtained detailed information about guard schedules, had identified regular routes taken by guards traveling to and from Arlington, and had even acquired floor plans of the quarters where the guards lived. "They knew more about our operations than some of our own support staff," Colonel Hayes explained. "This has forced us to reevaluate every aspect of our security protocols." Rodriguez learned that public access to the tomb would be restored Monday morning, but with enhanced screening procedures. The guards would continue their duties with modified schedules designed to reduce predictability. Most significantly, all guards would now receive regular security briefings and threat assessments. "Sergeant, I need to ask you directly, does this experience change your commitment to serving as a tomb guard?" Rodriguez had been anticipating this question since Agent Chen first revealed the terrorist plot. "Ma'am, yesterday I thought I understood what it meant to honor the unknown soldiers. Today I realized that understanding was incomplete. Those soldiers died protecting something worth dying for. If people are willing to plan violence against us for representing that same something, then our role is more important than I ever imagined." Colonel Hayes nodded approvingly. "That's the response I hoped for, but I needed to hear it from you directly. The Army is prepared to transfer any guard who feels the enhanced risk level is unacceptable." "No transfer needed, ma'am. If anything, I'm more committed to the mission now than I was yesterday." That evening, Rodriguez stood before the tomb of the unknown soldier during his first duty shift since the incident. The familiar weight of his rifle, the precise timing of his steps, the solemn responsibility of the watch, all of these elements remained unchanged. But his understanding of what they represented had been transformed. As tourists gathered to watch the changing of the guard ceremony, Rodriguez wondered if any of them knew how close they had come to witnessing an attack on this sacred place. He wondered if they understood that the precision and dedication they were observing had made him and his fellow guards targets for violence. The ceremony proceeded with its usual flawless execution, but Rodriguez felt the presence of the FBI agents he knew were positioned throughout the crowd. The seamless tradition continued, protected now by measures that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. During his 21 steps south, Rodriguez thought about his brother's wedding, about the joy that had been preserved, despite the threats that surrounded it. During his 21 steps north, he thought about the unknown soldiers whose sacrifice had created something worth both protecting and attacking. In the silence between his steps, Rodriguez understood that he had become part of something larger than ceremony or tradition. He had become a living symbol of values that some people were willing to die protecting, and others were willing to kill to destroy. The weight of that realization would stay with him for the rest of his time as a tomb guard, adding depth and meaning to every step he took in honor of those who would never take another step at all. 3 weeks after the terrorist plot was foiled, Rodriguez found himself adapting to a new reality at Arlington National Cemetery. The enhanced security measures had become routine, but they served as daily reminders that his role as a tomb guard extended far beyond ceremonial duties. Each morning brought security briefings that had never existed before, and each shift now included discreet surveillance that most visitors never noticed. The public had gradually learned about the thwarted attack through news reports, though many details remained classified. Rodriguez discovered that he had become something of a reluctant celebrity among visitors who recognized him as the guard who was targeted. This attention made him uncomfortable, as it shifted focus away from the tomb itself toward the individuals who guarded it. On a crisp November morning, Rodriguez was approached by a middle-aged woman during a brief break between ceremonies. She had been waiting near the guard quarters, clearly hoping for an opportunity to speak with him. "Excuse me, Sergeant Rodriguez?" she asked tentatively. "I'm Janet Morrison. My son was killed in Afghanistan 3 years ago, and I wanted to thank you for what you did." Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of these conversations. Gold Star families often visited Arlington, and their gratitude was both humbling and difficult to accept. "Ma'am, I appreciate your words, but I was just doing my job." "No," she said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had experienced profound loss. "What you did was more than your job. When those people planned to attack this place, they were planning to attack my son's memory, and the memory of every mother's child who's buried here. You protected all of them." Rodriguez had not considered this perspective before. He had focused on the threat to himself and his fellow guards. But Mrs. Morrison was right. The attack would have been an assault on every family who had lost someone in military service. "Ma'am, your son's sacrifice is what gives meaning to what we do here. We're honored to serve in his memory." Mrs. Morrison pulled out a folded letter from her purse. "I wrote this to you after I heard about what happened. I know you can't accept gifts, but I hoped you might read it when you have time." Rodriguez accepted the letter, knowing it would join dozens of others he had received since news of the incident became public. Each letter represented a family touched by military loss, and each one reinforced his understanding of why the Tomb Guard's mission mattered so deeply to so many people. That afternoon, Rodriguez read Mrs. Morrison's letter during his break. She had written about her son Michael, a 22-year-old Marine who had dreamed of becoming a teacher after his military service. She described the notification visit, the funeral at Arlington, and the comfort she had found in knowing that soldiers like Rodriguez stood watch over the sacred ground where her son rested. "When I heard about the plot against the tomb guards," she had written, "I realized that evil people understand something that good people sometimes forget. Symbols matter. The tomb represents everything my son died for, and you guards represent the continuing commitment to honor that sacrifice. By protecting you, those FBI agents were protecting every military family's faith that their loved one's death meant something." Rodriguez found himself deeply moved by this perspective. The terrorist plot had targeted him and his fellow guards, but its ultimate goal had been to attack the symbol they protected, and the families who found comfort in that symbol. During his next duty shift, Rodriguez noticed details he had previously taken for granted. An elderly man in a Korean War veteran's cap stood silently before the tomb for nearly an hour, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. A young woman placed a small American flag near the barrier, tears streaming down her face. A group of teenagers from a high school history class watched the changing of the guard ceremony with unusual solemnity. Clearly affected by their teacher's explanation of what the tomb represented, these observers weren't just watching a military ceremony. They were participating in a ritual of remembrance that connected them to every American who had died in service to the nation. The precision of Rodriguez's movements, the perfection of his uniform, the solemnity of his bearing, all of these elements helped create a sacred space where the living could honor the dead. A week later, Rodriguez received an unexpected visitor. Agent Chen arrived at Arlington for what she described as a follow-up interview but Rodriguez sensed there was more to her visit. "Sergeant, how are you adjusting to the enhanced security measures?" "They've become routine, Agent Chen. The other guards and I understand why they're necessary." Agent Chen nodded, then pulled out a thick file folder. "I wanted to share some information with you about the investigation. The cell we arrested was part of a larger network that had been planning attacks on military targets across the country. Arlington was their primary target because they understood its symbolic significance." She opened the folder to reveal photographs and documents that made Rodriguez's blood run cold. The terrorists had compiled detailed profiles of several tomb guards, including their schedules, their families, and their personal lives. Rodriguez saw surveillance photos of himself, of his parents' house, and of the church where David's wedding had taken place. They had been planning this operation for over a year. Agent Chen continued. "Your brother's wedding provided them with what they saw as the perfect opportunity to grab you away from the protected environment of Arlington." Rodriguez studied the documents, trying to comprehend the level of planning that had gone into targeting him. "Agent Chen, why are you showing me this now?" "Because we want you to understand the full scope of what you and your fellow guards represent to people who hate America. This wasn't a random plot. It was a carefully planned attack on one of our nation's most sacred symbols, and you were chosen specifically because of your dedication and visibility." Rodriguez felt a chill as he processed this information. They studied us that closely. They had identified you as someone whose capture would generate maximum media attention and psychological impact. Your military bearing, your family connections, your clean record, all of these factors made you an ideal target in their view. Agent Chen closed the folder and leaned forward. "Sergeant, there's something else. The intelligence community has reason to believe that other groups may attempt similar operations. What happened in October may not be an isolated incident." This revelation hit Rodriguez harder than anything else Agent Chen had shared. The enhanced security measures at Arlington weren't temporary precautions. They were permanent changes to accommodate an ongoing threat. What does that mean for the guards? For the mission? It means that your role has evolved beyond what anyone anticipated when the tomb guard tradition began. You're not just honoring the dead. You're defending a symbol that enemies of America specifically want to destroy. That evening, Rodriguez called his brother David to check in on how he and Sarah were adjusting to married life. During their conversation, Rodriguez decided to share some of what Agent Chen had revealed, though he kept the most sensitive details to himself. "David, I want you to know that the people who targeted me had been watching our family for months. They knew about your wedding. They knew where Mom and Dad live. They even had photos of Sarah." David's silence stretched for several seconds before he responded. "Mike, are you telling me that Sarah and I are still in danger because of your job?" "No, the immediate threat has been eliminated. But I want you to understand that what I do affects all of you in ways we never considered before. Have you thought about requesting a transfer? I mean, you've served with honor, and no one could blame you for wanting to move to a position with less risk." Rodriguez had been wrestling with this question for weeks. "David, those terrorists didn't target me because they thought I was weak or because they thought they could break me. They targeted me because what I represent is strong enough to threaten them. If I walk away now, they win. But at what cost, Mike? If something happens to you, it destroys Mom and Dad. If something happens to us because of your connection to you, it destroys you. There has to be a way to serve your country without putting everyone you love at risk." Rodriguez understood his brother's concerns, but he also understood something that David couldn't fully grasp. The tomb guards didn't just represent the military. They represented the idea that some things were worth dying for, and by extension worth living for with complete dedication. "David, when I took this assignment, I thought I was accepting a job with unusual requirements and high standards. Now I understand that I accepted a responsibility that extends far beyond my individual service. The tomb represents every family that has lost someone in military service. If I abandon that responsibility because it becomes dangerous, I'm abandoning all of those families." The conversation ended with David expressing his love and support, but Rodriguez could hear the worry in his brother's voice. The terrorist plot had created ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate security concerns, affecting the relationships between the guards and their families. Over the following days, Rodriguez noticed that several of his fellow guards were struggling with similar family pressures. Corporal Mitchell confided that his girlfriend had asked him to request a transfer, Sergeant. 6 months after the terrorist plot, Rodriguez found himself facing a decision that would define the rest of his military career. His 2-year commitment as a tomb guard was approaching its end, and he had been offered the opportunity to extend his service for an additional year. The choice would normally have been straightforward, but the events of October had complicated everything. The enhanced security measures had become seamlessly integrated into daily operations at Arlington. Visitors rarely noticed the additional precautions, and the sacred dignity of the tomb ceremonies remained unchanged. However, Rodriguez and his fellow guards lived with the constant awareness that they were potential targets simply because of what they represented. During a quiet moment between ceremonies, Rodriguez received a phone call that would force him to confront the full implications of his situation. The caller identified himself as Captain James Sullivan from the Army's Personnel Command. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm calling to discuss your career options as your current assignment approaches its conclusion. Given the circumstances surrounding your service as a tomb guard, the Army is prepared to offer you several opportunities that would utilize your experience while potentially reducing your exposure to targeted threats." Rodriguez had been expecting this call, but hearing it made the decision suddenly real and immediate. "What kind of opportunities, Captain?" "We have openings for instructor positions at various training facilities, staff positions at the Pentagon, and even the possibility of officer candidate school if you're interested in pursuing a commission. All of these positions would allow you to serve with distinction while maintaining a lower public profile." The offer was generous and professionally appealing. Rodriguez could continue his military service in positions that would advance his career without the unique risks associated with being a tomb guard. Most soldiers would view these opportunities as promotions to be eagerly accepted. "Captain, I appreciate the options the Army is providing. How long do I have to make a decision?" "Given the sensitivity of your current position, we can give you 30 days to decide. That should provide adequate time to transition either to a new assignment or to continued service at Arlington." After ending the call, Rodriguez walked through Arlington National Cemetery, passing thousands of white headstones that marked the final resting places of American service members. Each stone represented someone who had faced difficult choices about duty, sacrifice, and service. The weight of their collective sacrifice seemed to press down on him as he contemplated his own crossroads. That evening, Rodriguez drove to Philadelphia to have dinner with David and Sarah. The young couple had settled into married life, and their apartment reflected their hopes for a normal future filled with career advancement, travel plans, and eventually children. The contrast between their civilian concerns and Rodriguez's military reality had never been more apparent. "Mike, you look like you have something serious on your mind," Sarah observed as they sat down to dinner. Rodriguez shared the essence of his decision without revealing classified details about ongoing security concerns. "The Army is offering me some excellent opportunities to advance my career, but they would require leaving Arlington." David immediately understood the implications. "And you're actually considering staying?" "I'm considering all my options. The work at Arlington isn't finished just because I've completed 2 years of service." Sarah, who had grown up in a military family, asked the question that Rodriguez had been avoiding. "Mike, what does your heart tell you to do?" Rodriguez had been trained to make decisions based on logic, duty, and strategic thinking. Consulting his heart was not part of military decision-making protocols. However, Sarah's question forced him to acknowledge feelings he had been suppressing. "My heart tells me that walking away from Arlington right now feels like abandoning something important, but my head tells me that staying puts all of you at continued risk." David leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mike, Sarah and I have been talking about this. We know that what you do matters, and we know that it's dangerous because it matters. We've decided that we'd rather have a brother who's doing something he believes in, even if it involves risk, than a brother who's safe but unfulfilled." Sarah nodded in agreement. "When we heard about the terrorist plot, our first reaction was fear. But after we had time to think about it, we realized something important. Those people targeted you because what you represent threatens their worldview. If you stop representing those values, they win." Rodriguez felt a surge of gratitude mixed with concern. His family's support meant everything to him, but he worried about the burden he was placing on them. "David, Sarah, you need to understand that if I stay at Arlington, the enhanced security measures will continue indefinitely. There may be other attempts to target tomb guards. This isn't a temporary situation that will resolve itself. David's response surprised Rodriguez with its maturity and thoughtfulness. Mike, when Dad served in Vietnam, Mom lived with uncertainty and fear every day for a year. She told me that the hardest part wasn't the danger itself. It was feeling like the danger wasn't serving a purpose worth the risk. What you do at Arlington serves a purpose that makes the risk worthwhile. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering topics that ranged from practical security concerns to philosophical questions about duty and sacrifice. By the time Rodriguez drove back to Arlington, he had gained clarity about his family's perspective, but the ultimate decision remained his alone. The next morning, Rodriguez sought out Colonel Hayes to discuss his situation. He found her in her office, reviewing reports that he suspected related to ongoing security assessments for the Tomb Guard unit. "Ma'am, I need to discuss the decision I'm facing about extending my service here." Colonel Hayes looked up from her paperwork. "Sergeant, I've been hoping you'd come to talk about this. The Army has made you some attractive offers, and no one would question your decision if you chose to pursue them. Ma'am, what's your assessment of the long-term security situation for Tomb Guards?" Colonel Hayes was quiet for several moments before responding. "Sergeant, I'll be direct with you. The intelligence community believes that the symbolic significance of Arlington makes it a permanent target for groups that want to attack American values. Enhanced security will be a fact of life for Tomb Guards for the foreseeable future." Rodriguez appreciated her honesty. "Ma'am, in your opinion, does that change the essential mission of what we do here?" "It changes the context, but not the mission. If anything, it validates the importance of what you do. The fact that enemies of America specifically want to disrupt or destroy this tradition proves that it represents something they fear." Rodriguez asked the question that had been weighing on him most heavily. "Ma'am, if I choose to extend my service here, am I being selfish? Am I putting my own sense of purpose ahead of my family's legitimate concerns about safety?" Colonel Hayes considered this carefully. "Sergeant, that's a question only you can answer. But I will say this. Every person who chooses military service makes decisions that affect their families. The difference here is that the risk is more specific and more targeted than most military positions. However, the purpose is also more specific and more meaningful than most positions." She paused before continuing. "Rodriguez, you've become more than just a tomb guard. You've become a symbol of resistance to people who want to destroy what America represents. That's a heavy burden, but it's also a profound honor." Rodriguez left Colonel Hayes' office with a clearer understanding of the decision he faced. He wasn't just choosing between career opportunities. He was choosing between different ways of serving his country and different levels of commitment to a cause that had become deeply personal. That afternoon, as Rodriguez performed his duties at the tomb, he noticed an elderly woman standing near the barrier with a young boy who appeared to be her grandson. The woman was explaining to the child what the tomb represented and why the guards maintained their watch with such dedication. "The soldiers buried here died protecting our freedom," she told the boy. "The guards who watch over them remind us that their sacrifice still matters." The boy, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, asked a question that Rodriguez could hear clearly. "Grandma, do the guards ever get scared?" The woman's answer provided Rodriguez with the perspective he had been seeking. "I'm sure they do, sweetheart. But they do their job anyway because some things are more important than being scared." Rodriguez realized that his decision was not really about choosing between safety and danger, or even between different career paths. It was about choosing what kind of person he wanted to be and what kind of legacy he wanted to leave. 3 days before his decision deadline, Rodriguez made a choice that surprised even himself. He called Captain Sullivan and requested a meeting to discuss the career opportunities in detail, but not for the reasons everyone expected. "Captain Sullivan, I appreciate the Army's confidence in offering me these positions. However, I need to understand something specific about each opportunity. If I were to accept one of these assignments, would I be permitted to return to Tomb Guard duty in the future?" Captain Sullivan seemed surprised by the question. "Sergeant, that's an unusual request. Most soldiers view Tomb Guard duty as a stepping stone to other opportunities, not as a career destination. Why would you want to return?" Rodriguez had spent considerable time formulating his answer to this inevitable question. "Sir, the events of last October taught me that Tomb Guard duty represents something more significant than I initially understood. I want to explore other aspects of military service, but I also want to maintain the option of returning to Arlington when I have more experience and perspective. Sergeant Rodriguez, I need to be direct with you. The enhanced security requirements for tomb guards mean that the Army invests considerable resources in each guard's protection and training. We can't treat these positions as temporary assignments that soldiers move in and out of casually. Rodriguez had anticipated this response. Captain, what if I were to pursue officer training with the specific goal of eventually commanding the tomb guard unit? Would that change the Army's perspective on my career path? This question created a long pause in the conversation. The idea of a tomb guard pursuing officer training specifically to return and command the unit was unprecedented, but it addressed the Army's concerns about continuity and commitment. Sergeant, that's an interesting proposal. Let me discuss this with my superiors and get back to you. 2 days later, Captain Sullivan called back with an offer that exceeded Rodriguez's expectations. The Army was prepared to send him to officer candidate school, followed by specialized training in military security and ceremonial operations, with the understanding that he would return to Arlington as a lieutenant and eventual commanding officer of the tomb guard unit. This would be a unique career path, Sergeant. You would be the first tomb guard to pursue officer training with the specific goal of returning to command the unit. Are you certain this is what you want? Rodriguez felt a sense of certainty that had eluded him throughout the decision-making process. Yes, sir. I believe my experience as a tomb guard, combined with officer training, would allow me to serve the mission more effectively while also advancing my military career. The decision meant that Rodriguez would leave Arlington for 18 months of intensive training, but with the promise of returning in a leadership capacity. More importantly, it meant that the enhanced security measures and ongoing threats would become his responsibility to manage, rather than simply endure. Rodriguez's final day as an enlisted tomb guard arrived with unusual ceremony. Colonel Hayes had arranged for all the current guards to participate in a special changing of the guard ceremony that would mark Rodriguez's transition from enlisted service to officer candidate. As Rodriguez performed his final duty shift, he reflected on how profoundly his understanding of the role had evolved. 18 months earlier, he had seen tomb guard duty as an honor assignment that would look impressive on his military record. Now he understood it as a sacred trust that connected him to every American who had died in military service and to every family who had lost someone they loved. The terrorist plot had taught him that symbols matter deeply to both those who cherish them and those who hate them. The tomb of the unknown soldier represented something powerful enough to inspire both protection and attack, and that power came from the values it embodied, rather than the marble from which it was constructed. Agent Chen attended Rodriguez's departure ceremony, representing the ongoing partnership between the FBI and the tomb guard unit. During a private conversation, she shared information that provided context for Rodriguez's future responsibilities. Sergeant Rodriguez, the intelligence community continues to monitor threats against Arlington and other symbolic targets. Your decision to pursue leadership training while maintaining your commitment to the tomb demonstrates exactly the kind of long-term thinking we need to protect these sites effectively. Rodriguez asked the question that had been on his mind since making his decision. Agent Chen, do you believe the threats against tomb guards will decrease over time, or should I prepare for a career spent managing enhanced security? Sergeant, I believe the threats will evolve rather than disappear. Your role as a future commanding officer will involve adapting security measures to meet changing threats while preserving the essential character of what the guards do. It's a complex balance, but your experience as both a target and a guard gives you unique insights. Rodriguez's family gathered at Arlington for his departure ceremony. David and Sarah had driven down from Philadelphia, and his parents had flown in from their home in Texas. The ceremony would be Rodriguez's final official act as an enlisted tomb guard, but his family understood that it was also the beginning of a deeper commitment to the mission. His mother approached him before the ceremony began. Miguel, I want you to know that your father and I understand why you're doing this. When you were targeted by those terrorists, we were terrified. But we were also proud that our son represented something they feared enough to attack. His father, still every inch the Vietnam veteran despite his advancing years, shook Rodriguez's hand with military precision. Son, you're choosing a difficult path, but it's an honorable one. The Army needs leaders who understand that some things are worth protecting even when protection involves risk. David's words carried particular weight because Rodriguez knew they came from someone who had chosen a completely different life path. Mike, I don't pretend to understand everything about military service, but I understand commitment. What you're doing shows that you've found something worth committing your life to. That's more than most people ever find. The ceremony itself proceeded with the flawless precision that characterized every Tomb Guard activity. Rodriguez executed his final sequence of movements as an enlisted guard, then participated in a symbolic transfer of responsibility to his successor. The moment was both an ending and a beginning, marking his transition from protector to future leader. As the ceremony concluded, Rodriguez stood before the tomb of the unknown soldier one final time as an enlisted guard. The marble structure looked exactly as it had on his first day of duty, but everything about his relationship to it had changed. He was no longer just a soldier performing ceremonial duties. He was a guardian of a symbol that enemies of freedom specifically wanted to destroy. The terrorist plot had revealed the true significance of what the Tomb Guards represented, transforming Rodriguez's understanding of his role from ceremonial to strategic. His decision to pursue officer training while maintaining his commitment to Arlington reflected his recognition that protecting symbols of American values required both dedication and evolution. 18 months later, Second Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez would return to Arlington National Cemetery as the commanding officer of the Tomb Guard unit. He would bring with him enhanced training in security operations, leadership skills developed through officer candidate school, and, most importantly, the perspective of someone who had been personally targeted because of what he represented. The threats against the tomb and its guards would continue to evolve, requiring constant adaptation of security measures and operational procedures. However, Rodriguez's experience had taught him that the power of the symbol lay not in its immunity to attack, but in the willingness of people like him to protect it despite the risks. As Rodriguez departed Arlington for officer training, he carried with him the knowledge that his service represented something larger than military duty or career advancement. He had become part of a living tradition that connected the sacrifice of the unknown soldiers to the ongoing commitment of those who refused to let that sacrifice be forgotten or diminished. The tomb would continue to stand, the guards would continue their watch, and Rodriguez would return to lead them with a deeper understanding of why their mission mattered enough for enemies to fear and families to cherish. His story had become part of the larger story of Arlington National Cemetery, a place where the dead are honored by the living, and where symbols of American values are protected by those who understand that some things are worth both dying for and living for with complete dedication.